Good afternoon, everybody. We're learning the laws of evil speech, and we're on Rechilus, Tes Yadalit 914. And we're going to start by talking about a pretty common case. Let's say somebody comes up to you, and he wants to know who did something bad to him. And you could tell by the way that he's asking, he thinks it's you. He thinks you did something bad to him, and you know it wasn't you. You know who did it. Are you allowed to tell him? So let's get right to it. Something was done to Ruvain that was wrong. He doesn't know who did it. So Reuven comes to Shimon and he asks him, who did this to me? Even though Shimon understands that Reuven suspects him, it's forbidden to tell him who did it, even if you saw it yourself. Rather answer him, I didn't do it. And he says, of course, this is in a case where even if he wouldn't ask you, you wouldn't be allowed to tell him. But if you have all of the conditions that we mentioned earlier, then yeah, of course you're allowed to tell him who did it, because you're even allowed to tell him who did this bad thing, even if he didn't ask you. In the laws of Lashon Hara, there's really no difference if somebody asks you what happened or if you want to volunteer the information. If you have all of the conditions, it fits the conditions of L'Toelis, that there's a constructive reason to tell him who did this bad thing to him, then you could tell him whether he asks you or not. But in this case, if you're missing even one of those conditions, you can't tell him that who did it, even though he suspects you. You just have to say, I didn't do it. And we mentioned earlier in Hilchos Lashon Hara that it's praiseworthy to even to not say that you didn't do it, because that's like a praiseworthy thing. You're not required to do that, but it's absolutely forbidden to tell the person who did this bad thing to him. Look over there. All of the halachas, he's pointing to look back. We gave shiurim on this in the Laws of Lashon Hara, chapter 10, number 17, and to look over there. Okay, next case, Tezvav. Now we're going to talk about something that a lot of people make a mistake in. I'm going to give you an example. And from this, people can infer the law to other cases. Very often, you have people, they go from town to town. You have merchants. They go from city to city, and they sell their wares. You have like a flea market. And a townsperson comes and says, I'd like to buy that thing. Can you hold it for me while I go to my house and go get the money? And the merchant says, sure. And in the meantime, other customers come to the merchant, and they nudge him, sell me. I want to buy it. Right? They say, I would like to buy that. He says, sorry, I'm holding it for somebody else. Oh, come on, just give it to me. I have the money right here. What do you have to wait for somebody? I'll give you the money right now. And he relents. And then what happens later, the first guy comes back. Says, okay, can you give me the merchandise that you're holding for me? Who Moshivo? So what does the merchant say? Who Moshivi ploni bo v'lo aisi rotze latalo v'hishlich as amos v'lakach as chayra. And the merchant says, well, I'm really sorry, but this Reuven came and he just threw money at me and he took the merchandise. I didn't have a bal korchi. I didn't have a choice. I didn't want to fight with him. So the merchant blames the second guy who came to take the merchandise of taking the merchandise. The merchant, when he says this, he violates the Torah prohibition of not being a talebearer amongst your people. Even though when Reuven came and he nudged him to give the merchandise that was reserved for somebody else, that's a bad sin that he did. He wasn't supposed to do that. But even though it was a bad thing that he did, Reuven did, but nevertheless he took the merchandise and he paid for it, so it's legally his. So by the merchant telling the first guy what happened, that doesn't have any productive purpose, because he doesn't have any recourse in rabbinical court, because Reuven, even though he did like a really not nice thing by coming and nudging the guy to give him his merchandise, nevertheless it's a full sale and there's no legal recourse. So it's total Rechilus to share that. This is similar, and this is similar in everything to what we said in Sif 14. All the more so, many times it happens. Really, the merchant, what the merchant's saying isn't so accurate, because when the second guy came, how much did he have to really, twist his arm to give him the merchant to sell him the merchandise? He's got money right there. He doesn't even tell him that he already promised the merchandise to somebody else. He did it for Hazu. He did it for himself. He wanted to make a sale right away. Why should he wait if he's got money in front of him? In order that the first potential buyer shouldn't be upset with him. So he lies a little bit. He says, oh, it wasn't my fault. He says, really, it was that guy's fault. For sure, it's a very bad sin. That is the sin of Motzi Shemra, which is very serious. And it is relevant all of the prohibitions that we mentioned at the beginning of the book. So if you go to a store and you ask the merchant to hold something for you, and when you come back he sold it to somebody else, the merchant is not allowed to say that the guy pressured him, and you're not allowed to believe him either, especially because the merchant might not be telling the truth, because maybe he really wasn't pressured, he just want to get the money, and even though it was a very bad thing that they did in not holding the merchandise for you, nevertheless legally it is a binding sale and there's really nothing you can do about it. One has to be very careful in this type of thing. You're not allowed to tell the name of the second buyer. Even if the merchant says it was my fault, I shouldn't have done it, you're not allowed to tell him the second purchaser. Even if the merchant blames himself and he says, it really was my fault, I shouldn't have sold it to him, you're not allowed to say, and this is who I sold it to you, so maybe you can go buy it back from him. The reason is because often what's going to happen is the first purchaser, the potential purchaser, he's going to be upset, and he's going to start hating the second guy, like he came at me and did something wrong to me. So if this happens, if you're a store owner and you did this and you did something wrong and you sold the merchandise to a second person when you're supposed to hold it for the first person, you just tell them that, I'm sorry, I accidentally sold it to somebody else, and you're not allowed to tell them who you sold it to. And with that, we finished chapter 9 of Hilchos Rechilus, and this is very exciting. We have one chapter left, and then, God willing, we'll finish Sefer Chavetz Chaim. And the next chapter is very exciting because it's going to be various practical examples of when one can and one cannot speak Lashon Hara. Until now, we've learned all of the halachas, all of the laws, and now we're going to apply, the Chavetz Chaim is going to take what we learned and apply it to practical cases so we can know what to do in our everyday lives. And for those of you listening to the first time, if you would like to sign up for our daily email of Hilchos Lashon Hara, please send me an email. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and have a beautiful Sunday.